So in this video, we're actually going to look at coding our Android app. We've created it in the last video and we've set up Android Studio. So we're ready to go, and we're going to continue right where we left off. I have my test Android device, virtual device running in the background. I'm ready to go. Now, there's three main files that get created that we're going to manipulate to create our Android apps. The first one that opens by default when you create a new project in Android Studio is the activity main.xml file. Now, Google, in their wisdom, decided to add XML, an XML option to coding Android apps to make it easier for beginner developers to get into creating apps. What XML is extensible markup language, which is generally used to make web pages. It's very similar to HTML. And we have two different views that we can look at our XML files in. One is design view, so it's a WYSIWYG editor that you've seen in other integrated development environments like NetBeans, where you can drag and drop widgets onto the screen and position them where you want. And a text editor, where you see the text in the background that is generated by that WYSIWYG editor. So I will post a link if you're interested in learning XML or manipulating XML to create your GUIs for your Android apps. But we're going to go back to design view for a minute. Right now you'll notice rendering problems. To get around that, I'm going to make my project. And after I've built my project, I can go over here and refresh my screen, and you'll notice now it's rendering correctly, so I can zoom in. I've got a bunch of options here that we set when we created the project that I can change. If I want to change the API, if I want to change the type of default device I'm trying to develop this application for, I can change that all in here. Now, I've got a list of layouts and widgets available to me to position on the screen, so I can just drag and drop. So for example, if I want a button, I'll drag and drop it and position it wherever I want. Now, as soon as I drag an element, you'll see a component tree. These are the components: a text view that has hello world on it and new button on my screen. I also have properties that I can set. Now, when we're coding Android apps, we have to use the Android API and the Android library. We can't use the Swing library that we've been using in our Java programs to date. So that does require you to learn some new classes and how to use a new library. But what you're going to find is, now that you've done Swing, a lot of the Android classes and widgets that we're going to use are very similar to their Swing counterparts. So we're going to see properties like width, visibility, text, text style, text size, etc. in here that we can manipulate, and we can change that all in the properties menu. So if we wanted to create our GUI on here, we could set it up very easily, just like we could in NetBeans. Now, the second file that we're going to take a look at that's created for you is the Android manifest file. So again, this is another XML file. And the manifest file is going to tell you a couple of things. Unique package name, which we talked about in the first video. So the unique package name, publish to Google an app that has a package that's already taken by another app. And that's why they use a website domain name kind of in the package name reversed, so that it's not duplicated by anyone else. Theoretically, if you have own this website, you won't name two apps the same thing. Now, the other thing the manifest file tells you is if you've ever installed an Android or an app on your Android device, it will tell you if the app needs permission. So if, for example, if the app requires the use of the camera, or access to your contacts, or access to the network, all that stuff pops up and is warned before you install it. That's all put in the manifest file. So if you need access to the camera and you don't put it in the manifest file, Android, the operating system on the device, will not let you have access to that item. The user of that device has to give you permission, or give permission to your app to use that that ability. So you have to put that in your manifest file. Now, we're not going to do a lot with the manifest file. That's kind of an extension for you as you get really serious about Android app development if you continue on. Now, the third file is the one you're going to be most familiar with, is going to be a Java file. Now, if you take a look, here's my Java file. So MatCloud, which was the name of our project, extends action bar activity. Now, remember, activities are like screens or JFrames. So here's the code that's generated by default for us. Now, on create, you're gonna kind of live in here as your constructor. I would consider on create kind of like your constructor. So whenever this activity, this screen, this app is created, the on create function is called by Android operating system. Now, you also seen the on create function. There's the set content view, and you'll see this word a lot, view. It's kind of like a component or widget in Android language. So set content view r.layout.activity main, which is referencing our activity_main XML file where we just recently added some buttons. So in our main activity Java class, what we're saying is set the view, set the panel to this this layout from this file that we've created in XML. Sort of like when we were doing swing programming, when you would say set content pane on your JFrame to set the content pane of your JFrame to a particular container or panel. So that's what set content view does. Now, we are ready to actually do some coding in our main activity here. So we are going to create two buttons, and I'm going to call them button B1, button B2. Now, as soon as I type this in, a little message will pop up, android.widget.button, which is basically suggesting that I add that import to my imports. So I could type those in by hand, or if you'll notice the little shortcut there, Alt-Enter, I'm going to hit Alt-Enter, and it's going to add that import for me. Now, when using Swing, we could do something like this. The way Android apps operate, we're not going to be able to actually create the button here, because if we try and run our project, and I'm going to run my project right here, so if I run my project right here, you'll notice that unfortunately my application is stopped. It's actually crashing, and I'm getting a null pointer exception. The reason for that is just the way the Android application is created. We can't actually create buttons until the app has been created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create the buttons. I can declare them at the top globally, but I have to create the buttons in here. And when I'm creating my buttons, I also have to pass in an activity or that is going to be its owner. So I'm going to pass in this project, and I'll do that for button 2 as well. And then just like we would in Swing, I'm going to go set text and say button 1, b2 dot set text button 2. Now, if I ran this project right now, which I will, the screen that'll pop up is actually the screen that we created in our activity main XML file. And that's because, remember, and that's a bad habit, I just closed the Android virtual device, which you're probably used to doing. You'll probably do that a bunch of times too. You're probably used to when we're doing Swing projects, but now that means I have to restart my Android device. Well, what's happened is I've actually created the buttons, I've got them ready to go, but I haven't actually added them to the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually eliminate this content view so that we're not adding anything else. I'm going to create my own layout that I want to use. So the closest thing in Android, and I will post the API as a link for you so you can look at some of these classes, but the closest thing to a flow layout is a linear layout. So I'm going to create a linear layout. I'm going to go Alt-Enter to add the import, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to add view, which would be just like adding a component, just going add to a container in Swing. I'm going to add view B1. I'm going to add view B2. And as you kind of go through, you'll notice the theme is the similarities between Swing and Android. So there are different libraries, they have different methods, but they work very similar. So I'll switch that to L1. So I've added B1 and B2 to my layout. Now what I have to do is, and just like I would do in Swing, go this dot set content pane. I'm going to go this dot set content view to L1, and now I'll have to restart my virtual device and test my program. And through the magic of video, you don't have to wait for me, you can see the finished result. So I've got my button 1 and button 2. So obviously the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to do something when the user presses that button. Now in Swing, what I would do is I would say implements action listener here. In Android, it's on click listener. Again, I'm going to have to go Alt-Enter. It's going to tell me to implement methods. Remember, if we did action listener, we have to override the function action performed. In Android, that action is not action performed, it's on click. So you notice I have an on click function that I've just added. So this function is where we're going to handle when the user actually clicks on a button, and you notice it passes in a view V instead of an action event E, but this view V is still going to tell us about what was clicked. And you'll notice, you know, when we add a view, we're actually adding the button. So the buttons that generate the buttons or the widget that actually generate the event get passed into this function. Now again, just like in Swing, what I have to do is I have to tell the buttons that I now want it to pay attention when it's clicked on. So I'll say set on click listener, and I need to pass in the class that's going to handle this, and that happens to be this program because I implemented on click listener here. So I'm going to say b1.set on click listener this, b2.set on click listener this. So this tells Android that we want these buttons to listen for events for when they're clicked, and when they do, we want to pass that event, that action onto this class, which will handle it in this function. So now, again, just like action event would tell us, we could figure out which button was pressed. We can figure it out using the view V object. So I'm going to say if V equals button B1, then I can go system.out.println button 1 was pressed, and on top of that, just to do something a little more interesting, I'll say set text to clicked. And then I can do an else if here if I had multiple widgets. Since we only have 2, it's a good guess. I can just say else that the other button was pressed. I can say system.out.println button 2 was pressed. And let's play around with the visibility. So we'll say b1 dot visibility. Set visibility dot set visibility. I think it's 1 to make it invisible, but let's give it a try. Okay, so here's my brand new application. I'm going to click on button 1.